What was your first time you came to Circle Pines, or your first time you learned about it?
First time I came here was, I was on the board, although I don't think we called it that. It was the steering committee for the Michigan Federation of Food Co-ops. And that's where almost all of the buying clubs in the state of Michigan, they all belong to the same organization and got their food from the People's Warehouse down in Ann Arbor area. So what they did then was they would have board meetings, and because they were covering the whole state, I mean, they'd have maybe one a year up in the, not the upper peninsula, but pretty close, you know, and then one down in this area, and then probably the balance of the meetings were all over in Ann Arbor. So it kind of gave it people a chance to go to a meeting without having to drive too far, you know, if they were on board. So, and I just happened to pick it here. I don't know how that happened. I mean, there was a food buying club already existing in Delton at that point in time, so that may have been why they came here. I just have no clue. But when I first wanted to get good quality food, and by that at the time I meant organic, or I meant cheese that was not dyed all kinds of strange colors, and at that time there were no such things as health food stores. I mean, there were pill stores, and you know, health food stores still sell a lot of supplements and pills, but you could not get that, you know, you couldn't get organic flour anywhere. I mean, it just was extreme. I mean, you buy a little half-pound bag of whole wheat flour, you know, and pay $10 for it, you know. So the food buying clubs, the food co-op movement kind of solved that distribution system problem and made it available for people to get the quality food they wanted. So what happened was, though, that this first food buying club had like 120 some people on the waiting list because nobody wanted to leave that buying club and go set up another one, because they've been friends for years or decades maybe, and so they just nobody wanted to do that. So they're sitting there with 120 names on their list, and I said, well, we got to do something about this. I mean, we obviously have enough here to start another 2 or 3 buying clubs, you know, and I said, why don't you just give me the names of them, and why don't you let me purchase and kind of shadow some of the people in your food buying club, you know, for 6 months or so, and I'll figure it out and start a new one. And at that point, it was just a matter of getting a hold of all the people on that waiting list, and I soon learned that you did not say to them, do you want to help set up a food buying club? And they'd all say no. They wanted to be in one, but they didn't want to set one up. And after a while, I just learned, I didn't tell them that right away. I would take up the coffee and find out what they were good at, you know, and if they were, you know, I would be first looking for somebody, you know, who could do some leading, sort of, you know, hold meetings and things like that, and somebody who was good at money, and somebody who was really organized, that would be really good at ordering, you know. So I would just kind of talk them up, and then I would call them back in a week or so and say, well, the new food buying club is going to go if you're willing to be the treasurer. And then they go back out. So I made it feel bad. So that's, in that way, we fairly quickly, and our upper limit on food buying clubs at that point was about 30 families, because we were dividing up food in people's basements and, you know, in garages and things like that. So space was always an issue for the food buying clubs, and so anytime we got up to full size, and you know, then we'd start another one. So that was how I became known as somebody who knew how to do that. Board, you know. So I came here, and before that I had no knowledge at all of Circle Pines, and very limited knowledge, I would have to say, about the co-op movement in general. I mean, I knew of some things. I knew of agricultural cooperatives and the rural electric cooperatives and things like that, but didn't really have much exposure to other cooperatives until I came here.
So it almost sounds like you came to cooperation or cooperatives kind of through the back door.
Yeah.
Like you were starting clubs in a way.
Right, yeah. And back then it was always that thing. It's like, oh, that's not really a food co-op, you know, because by that people meant it wasn't a storefront. You know, and there were a few storefronts around, you know, but I always used to say, well, we cooperate more every time we order food than you do when you walk through the door and pay somebody at the cash register, you call it a co-op, but I don't see much else happening there. And that was kind of the thing. It's like, after you had like 10 or 12 or 15 food co-ops in a geographic area, then by that time you've developed a market. And so it became possible, I think, at some levels, when the food buying clubs were successful, to set up a storefront and move to that kind of a thing. And what happened in Holland was that Meijer's was always paying attention. The Meijer stores, we would send out people to do comparison shopping on things that we thought we could buy locally. And even at that time, we knew that there were certain things that really didn't have to get organic. I mean, they were pretty clean foods. They weren't coming from a system that had a lot of pesticides or anything in it. So we would shop around to see who had the best prices on this or that. And so one day somebody at the Meijer store saw somebody walking around, one of our people walking around with a clipboard making notes and checking off, and they said, well, what are you doing? And they told them what they were doing, and there wasn't a hostile conversation at all. It was just, and within a couple of months, Meijer's had bulk foods in place. I mean, they listened. I mean, they listened pretty good. I'm not a big fan of Meijer necessarily, but they listened real well. And then the same thing happened later, because we were still doing that, and especially even more once they got bulk foods in, and they got stopped again. I said, what are you doing? And, well, food buying clubs, and this is what we do, and kind of like you do with your bulk food section. And I said, well, why? What's so special about the food you get? I said, well, mostly we're looking for organic stuff. And within a year, Meijer's had an organic line, and now I'm thinking that if you want organic produce, they may be the place to go. So I think the food buying clubs kind of developed the market for that to happen.
Wow.
Because there wasn't anybody else doing it at that time. So.
So and then, so what year did you start getting involved here?
Well, I can't remember exactly what year. I think I got on the board in 1979. Yeah, I think it was 1979. So it's either late 79 or early 80s, when I came here. And then at some point in time, I came down and started working as winter staff here at Circle Pines. I was kind of back in the cross-country ski days, and we'd have 100 people here. We'd have people sleeping on cement floors and sleeping bags and unheated cabins to come cross-country ski here. I mean, the one we used to have old cabins up at the Orchards area still. They were nasty, but they kept the snow off you, and that was about all people seemed to care about. So I would come down. I was working construction at that time, and I would come down and work here in the winter. It was easier.
Yeah.
Nicer work.
So. Did you ever go to camp, or were you ever involved with any other camps?
I hated camp as a kid. I've been working for camps for 25 years more. I don't know. For me, as a kid, I grew up in the country, and for me, going to camp, I went to a Y camp not too far down the road from where my house was, and I just hated it. It was like school. It was organized. It's like I couldn't just go do what I wanted to do. And when I was home, I couldn't. I'd get on my bike and go 20 miles in a day. I could explore and do all kinds of things. And you couldn't do that at camp. So I was not a big camp person as a kid. I just didn't really care for it. I went to church camps and a few of those kinds of things, but it just never was my cup of tea at the time.
What's the appeal here for you?
Well, I would say it's the uniqueness of the organization in the sense that we are kind of a cooperative center. So we are like a hub almost, for different co-op sectors to come to, and that's kind of been borne out. I mean, it was true back then, and it's also true now that with the co-op weekends that we have, where you got food co-ops and housing co-ops and beer co-ops and all kinds of different sectors of the cooperative movement are coming here to meet. And I've always been a little bit left politically, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I don't know, what am I missing?
Well, I think it's interesting now. I mean, in the '80s, we were still kind of, you know, we were not a fit for the community in any way, shape, or form. I mean, because we were left politically, and you know, we had black people here. What I like now is that I think we can still deliver on a lot of the more progressive ideals, and but be good neighbors now, and be part of the community, and serve parts of the community. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what keeps me here now.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the power is of, I don't know, I was talking to Tom about, you know, like just, because at the core of it is cooperation, is working together. And that's at the core of the idea, the politics of it. And everything about it is almost, it's kind of about equality and everyone gets a say. And
Right.
yeah, what do you think it is about that that's appeals to you or appeals to the people that come here?
I think it's almost like an experimental station in many ways. It's like people get to try out different things here. You know, some things work out, and other things don't. I mean, I spent a number of years, probably 10 or 15 years, doing adventure ed kinds of programming, and to me that was like a living laboratory where you go try something out, you practice it, you see what works and what doesn't work, you know, and you get a chance to get feedback from other people on how you're behaving and what you're doing, and whether you're working together as a group to accomplish a task, or are you the one that's sabotaging it, or are you the one that's just not really putting in the effort to make it happen, you know, that whole concept of group work. And I watched over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of groups that I ran through adventure programming, and it was really interesting to see. I learned kind of what the concept, I learned what I think of as prerequisites for being able to cooperate. You know, it's like, you know, if you're gonna take a class in higher mathematics, you better have had some things, you know, prep you. You know, you're not going to do trig before you do algebra, or you know, there are things, skill sets you need to build up. And I think that one of the things that's neat about being here is to watch how people build up, you know, some of the things. And community is one of the big ones. It's like, if you got a group of people on an adventure course, they have to first decide that they are a group. Because if they don't think they're a group, if there isn't a sense of us, then they're not going to get together to do the other things, one of which is to collaborate, to work together, you know. And if you're going to work together on something, trying to accomplish it, they usually have to talk about it, you know. So there's those three things: it's the community, the collaboration, and the communication. All those three things have to be there before you actually can be productive, you know, no matter what kind of co-op it is. You know, those things have to, those elements have to be. There's probably many others, but those three, when they don't happen, you know, watching people struggle in a group to try and do a group task when one of those is missing is almost comical. It's interesting, and I think what we do here, especially during the summer camp, you know, with the work projects and kids working together to, you know, clean up dishes and set up for meals and all of that stuff. It's not a very classroomy kind of way of teaching, but it is an effective way of teaching some of those kinds of skills. You know, that they're the awareness of community being one of them, and how to communicate with each other if you're doing a difficult task. Those things, you know, so we teach by practice, and I think that's another piece of what, you know, what works here.
Yeah, then that brings it around to what might appeal to you. Is that wasn't like school?
Yeah.
It's real practical.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's you know, I think school is great if it's out in the woods, or you know, if you're doing something, you know. But if you're just sitting there in the lecture hall, that's just useless much of the time.
Yeah,
Not only that, it's boring, but.
cool. I think that's great.
Okay, cool.